Do you like gambling? Do you want to get it twisted? Well, gamers, gals, and my non-binary pals, today I bring to you, after months and months of waiting on Master Duel, for better and for worse, Tier Lament yugioh. Let's just get right into it.
They literally say you will win over a period of time. You understand? Casinos are not profitable for a reason. Get it twisted.
So this deck can be broken up into two pieces, the Tier Laments and the yugiohs. The Tier Laments are a series of monsters from the Visas Starfrost line, hailing from the primeval planet Parallelino, which is ruled by his more possessive and power-hungry self, Rhinoheart. The princesses all share the same primary effect as their secondary effect. If this card is sent to the graveyard by card effect, you can fusion summon one monster from your extra deck by placing fusion materials mentioned on it from your hand, field, or graveyard, including this card from the graveyard, on the bottom of your deck. This means if any of the three princesses are sent to the graveyard by any effect, from discarding a danger, to Foolish Burial, to a Needlebug Nest, you essentially have three nearly generic miracle fusions, and yes, this effect can trigger on your opponent's turn. I'm sure this will not turn out poorly for the metagame. Backed up by a litany of powerful back row, the Tier Laments form an extremely powerful fusion engine that makes branded Despia look like fossil warriors in comparison. The other half of the deck are the yugiohs, or technically the exchange of the spirit monsters. These are all retrains of yugioh's monsters from the anime that focus around both getting cards into the graveyard with Kelbeck and Agito, or getting them out of there with Keldo and Budora, which returns 3 cards from either player's graveyards back to the deck by banishing themselves from the graveyard. Are you starting to see the synergy here? With Tier Laments acting as the primary fusion engine and the yugiohs acting as both mill targets and extenders, the deck reached a literal Tier 0 status in the TCG, becoming arguably the best deck ever in Yu-Gi-Oh! Full stop. So, let's just get started onto the deck profile. So let's start off with the Tier Lament portion first. We've got 2 Tier Laments Merly, which alongside his fusion effect, if this card is normal or special summon, you can send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard. Is pretty good if you wanna, just kind of get it twisted. You will hit, by the way. Next, we've got 2 Havnis, which when your opponent activates a monster effect on the field, as a quick effect, this is a hand trap, by the way, you can special summon this card from your hand, and if you do, send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard. If you hit some names or any yugiohs, you've basically just started your turn on your opponent's turn. Next up, we've got 2 Tier Laments Shiren. During your main phase, you can special summon this card from your hand, and if you do, send one monster from your hand to the graveyard, then send the top 3 cards of your deck to the graveyard. So if you're going Shiren pitch, say, Kelbeck, or any Tier Lament name, congratulations, you've basically got it twisted. And finally, we've got Tier Laments Rhinoheart. If this card is normal or special summoned, you could send one Tier Laments monster from your deck to the graveyard, except Rhinoheart. This is basically just a 1-card combo, because guess what? The monster you send off of Rhinoheart can fuse into your primary playmakers in the extra deck. If this card is sent to the graveyard by card effect, you can special summon this card, but banish it when it leaves the field, and if you do, send one Tier Laments card from your hand to the graveyard, and you can only use each effect of Tier Laments Rhinoheart once per turn. Although it technically doesn't have a miracle fusion effect, it basically serves that purpose by serving as both fodder as well as a Foolish Burial. Next, onto the yugiohs, we're going to start with the Shufflers. Keldo, the Sacred Protector. You can discard one other Earth Fairy monster and special this card from your hand, then add one exchange of the Spirit or one card that mentions it from your deck to your hand. And quick effect, this is also shared by Budora, who's coming up. You can banish this card from your field or graveyard, then target up to 3 cards in any graveyards, or up to 5 if exchange of the Spirit is on your field or in your graveyard. Spoilers, it won't ever be. Shuffle them into the deck, and you can only use each effect of Keldo once per turn. Budora's first effect is extremely similar. You can discard another Earth Fairy monster, special summon this card from your hand, then you can place one Gravekeeper's Trap from your deck face up in your spell and trap zone. Spoilers, you're not playing that. And it also shares the Graveyard Shuffle effect. Next, we're playing 2 Kelbeck. This card is a hand trap, which is insane to think about why this deck's engine is a hand trap engine as well. If the card is sent from the hand or deck to your opponent's graveyard, except during the damage step, you can target one special summon monster your opponent controls, special summon this card from your hand, then return that monster to your hand. Yeah, this is Compulse. If this card is sent from the hand or deck to the graveyard, you can activate this effect. Each player sends the top 5 cards of their deck to the graveyard. The rest of the deck does not matter. You're not playing Exchange of the Spirit in this deck because it's extremely win-worn and also bad. And yeah, this is a excellent mill option, and if you hit it, get it twisted, because you're going to be hitting that slot machine button. And finally, we've got 2 yugioh, which shares the similar hand trap activation effect, where if a card is sent from the hand or deck to your opponent's graveyard, you can special summon this card from your hand. Then you could special summon 1 level 4 Earth Fairy monster from your graveyard, except yugioh. This is primarily used just as an additional mill target and is considered the worst of the millers, but when you just treat this card as Needlebug Nest when you hit it, it's pretty good. For the rest of the Tier Limits back row, we've got Terraforming and Primeval Planet Parallelino. When this card is activated, you can add 1 Tier Limits monster or 1 via Starfrost. Spoilers, you're not playing that. From your deck to your hand. Fusion monsters and Tier Limit monsters you control gain 500 attack, and if a Tier Limits monster you control or in your graveyard is shuffled into the deck or extra deck, such as, I don't know, by miracle fusing it, you can target 1 card on the field, destroy it. Why does this deck have a Stratos pop in its field spell? Who knows? And you can only use this effect once per turn, and you can only activate Planet once per turn. Next, we are playing 3 Tier Limit Scream. Some people play 2, I play 3 because I want to be consistent. If a monster is normal or special summon and you control a Tier Limits monster or via Starfrost, you can send the top 3 decks cards of your deck to the graveyard. Also, for the rest of this turn, all monsters your opponents control lose 500 attack, and if this card is sent to the graveyard by card effect, you can add 1 Tier Limits trap from your deck to your hand, and you can only use each effect once per turn. This basically turns cards like Rhinoheart and Merly into Foolish Burials plus mills, which is absolutely insane. So Merly turns from, say, a mill 3 to a mill 6, and it can also be chain blocked, which is funny, I guess. Additionally, it also searches your back row in trap cards, but we're going to get to that after we look at Tier Limit's Heartbeat. You can target 1 spell or trap on the field, or you can target 2 if you control via Starfrost, shuffle them into the deck, then send 1 card from your hand to the graveyard, and if it's sent to the graveyard by card effect, you can target 1 Tier Limit's trap in your graveyard and add it to your hand. This card is okay. It's a pretty good discard outlet if all else truly does fail, and you could discard, say, like a Soliak from your hand. But Heartbeat is primarily here as a way to deal with weird matchups, as well as getting rid of problematic floodgates, such as Skill Drain, such as Summon Limits, and especially Necro Valley, which Exosister is playing. God damn it. Next, we're playing Tier Limits Crime for the trap card. When a spell or trap card or monster effect is activated, while you control a Tier Limits monster or via Starfrost, negate the activation, and if you do, shuffle that card into the deck, then send 1 monster from your hand to the graveyard. Fun fact, if you don't destroy it or shuffle it into the deck, you don't have to send, which is insane. If this card is sent to the graveyard by card effect, you can target 1 of your banished Tier Limit monsters, such as a banished Rhinoheart, and add it to your hand. And you can only use 1 effect of Tier Limit's Crime per turn, and only once that turn. This card is searchable, so why not play it? And finally, we've got 1 copy of Tier Limit's Soliak. If you control a Tier Limit's monster or via Starfrost, you can target 1 effect monster your opponent controls, negate its effects, then send 1 monster you control to the graveyard. If this card is sent to the graveyard by card effect, you can add 1 Tier Limit's monster from your deck to your hand, and you can only use each effect of Tier Limit's Soliak once per turn. Even if, say, a normal summon, Merly gets negated, and that's all you have, if you have a Soliak, you can treat the Merly as a Miracle Fusion as well if you have other names in your hand and are able to use the Merly's graveyard effect to fuse. So Soliak is just a way to never keep yourself out of the game. Oh, by the way, the effect negation is permanent. Who decided that was a good idea? Next, we're going to go off into the basically just rest of bits and pieces of the deck. Next, we've got DD Crow. We're playing 3 of this. You can discard this card to the graveyard and target 1 card in your opponent's graveyard, banish it. This is especially important because against Tier Limits, the monster in the graveyard that's using its Miracle Fusion effect has to use itself for the fusion. So if you shuffle it back with a shuffler or you banish it using DD Crow, they will not be able to fusion summon because that card is no longer in the graveyard. You get the idea. We don't have access to the Bestial monsters in Master Duel yet, so DD Crow is basically your best bet. We're playing 1 Herald of the Orange Light. This synergizes extremely well with the Ishizu cards. It's pretty sacky, and it's kind of just, you know, there for the sack factor, but it's a 1-of, so who cares? Get it twisted. We have 3 Maxi, the Master Duel tax. We're playing 1 Fairy Tale Snow. This deck is not amazing at abusing Fairy Tale Snow, or it's not even that good versus Tier Limit, but against any other deck such as Sprite or just basically any other deck that's not Tearlament, Fairy Tail Snow is a knockout punch and also acts as a level 4 extender for this deck to go into your rank 4s. Speaking of, we have Night Sword Serpent. If this card is sent to the graveyard by a card effect, you can special summon this card but banish it when it leaves its field. Spoiler alerts, you're using this to go into a rank 4, and that is basically all you will ever use it for. Next, we've got Instant Fusion. The main playmaker of this deck is a level 5 or lower fusion monster. Yeah, so I don't think I have to explain that. We're playing 2 Triple Tactics talent. I would play 3, but I kind of needed to cut space in order to make room for this. Crossout Designator. Now, originally, I would not be playing Crossout Designator. I think that playing super sacky cards like this is not necessarily good, especially a card with as narrow application as Crossout Designator, which just acts as maybe at best a copy of Called by the Grave against most other decks. But because Tearlament is so positioned to be without a doubt a tier 0 deck in Master Duel, I think that using Crossout Designator as essentially a Solemn Judgment, Strike, or Warning versus Tearlament, because this card will just essentially be live for anything they are going to throw at you, I think that Crossout Designator has a great spot in this deck's main deck. Next up, we've got Muddragon of the Swamp. This can be made using a Tearlament and a DD Crow, which is kind of funny. It's also a level 4, so you can go into rank 4s. We've got Kit Kolos. This card is absolutely crazy. If this card is special summoned, you can take one Tearlament's card from your deck and either add it to your hand or send it to the graveyard. So it's a Miracle Fusion or a Stratos, which is absolutely broken. And you can target one monster you control, special one Tearlament's monster from your hand, and if you do, send the targeted monster to the graveyard. If this card is sent to the graveyard by card effect, you can send the top 5 cards of your deck to the graveyard. The main combo that you'll be using with Kit Kolos is Kit Kolos will add Merly, and then Kit Kolos will send itself to summon Merly, and then you'll just mill 8, and then just by the raw power of mathematics and statistics, you'll basically hit and get it twisted. So yeah, this deck is definitely, it's got some stuff. Next, we've got Predaplant Draco's Stapelia. It can be made with a fusion monster or a dark monster. This is especially easy to make in this deck for, I don't know, obvious reasons. Next up, we've got Tearlament's Rukolos. Other aqua monsters you control cannot be destroyed by battle. You can only use each of the following effects once per turn. When your opponent activates a card or effect that includes an effect to special summon a monster, quick effect, you can negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it and send one Tearlament's card from your hand or face-up field to the graveyard, a la Solemn Warning. And if this card is sent to the graveyard by a card effect, such as its own, you can special summon this card. I don't think I have to explain why this is broken. It uses Kit Kolos, but Kit Kolos is at 1 and not banned here, so fuck it, we ball. Now we've got Tearlament's Kaleido Heart. This one is not a monster you're going to be going into all the time, but it still is extremely powerful in cleaning up board states, or if your mills are good enough on your opponent's turn, stopping their setup combo. Yes, you can make this on your opponent's turn. It's disgusting. It requires Tearlament's Rhino Heart and 2 aquas, cannot be used as fusion material. If it is special summoned or if an aqua monster is sent to your graveyard by card effect while this card is on the field, you can target one card your opponent destroys and shuffle it into the deck. If this card is sent to the graveyard by card effect, you can special summon this card, and if you do, send one Tearlament's card from your deck to the graveyard, and you can only use each effect of Kaleido Heart once per turn. Yeah, spin, Foolish Burial, broken. Next up, we've got Baron de Fleur. I forgot to mention this because I'm blind, but we're also playing Diviner of the Herald. Diviner of the Herald is an extremely powerful card in this deck that we're playing essentially as a one-of because I couldn't find space for it. And it's a great way to send either a Kelbeck or a Guido if you need mills, or a Mudora or Keldo if you just want to get a shuffler into the graveyard, and makes itself level 6. And because it's a tuner, you can use Diviner of the Herald plus any of your level 4 extenders to go into Baron de Fleur. Baron de Fleur is just a great way to, I don't know, set up an Omni Negate. It's broken. We've got Abyss Dweller. This card is paramount in this format. I believe that if you are playing Tearlament, one of your primary checkpoints should be to make Dweller as soon as possible so that you can resolve stuff like Kelbeck and Agido without any fear of your opponent getting any graveyard effects. And Abyss Dweller is, again, just an extremely powerful card. Also, because all these guys are water, Abyss Dweller boosts your guys, which is broken and disgusting. We've got Bagushka as a plan B. We've got Redoer. Redoer is an especially powerful card just because it's got a nice little tag-out effect. It can generate resources, but also it detaches its materials for effect. So if you, say, have a Tearlament Shiren or a Night Sword Serpent, it will trigger them, which is absolutely broken. We've got Zeus just to clean up gummy board states. We've got Ausa to steal our opponent's Mudoras or Keldos or any of the Urshizu stuffs. We've got Dark for the mirror match and versus Sprite. We have Sprite Elf to revive cards such as Merly on our opponent's turn in case we want to get it twisted, or we can revive Herald. Additionally, we have Access Code Talker just to basically OTK or to clean up gummy board states. And finally, we have the White Woman Jump Scare in case we need to clear monsters off of our opponent's board without, you know, really having to stress too much about floaters. This deck does somewhat struggle to out huge bodies as well as monsters that are like unaffected, such as against like a rival Cybers. So Underworld Goddess of the Closed World is an amazing way to get around those sort of stuff. So for techs, we have King of the Swamp. King of the Swamp can basically act as Kit Colossus 2 through 4 while it's in your hand or graveyard. You can also play Poly if you really want to, but I find that King of the Swamp is a little too cute and was only really necessary in, say, the OCG or the TCG currently if you really needed to fulfill a specific condition, and we already have Kit Close, so this card is basically worthless. Anyways, we have every single danger ever. The dangers discard for effect, so they do trigger the tier elements, monsters, and back row, and you could soup them up into Curious, which again is just Foolish Burial. Speaking of, we have Foolish Burial and Foolish Burial Goods. These are extremely powerful consistency pieces, but I feel that just naturally getting more play extenders or ways to get it twisted in your hand is a bit better than just the one-for-ones that Foolish Burial and Goods provide. Speaking of extremely balanced cards, we have Super Polymerization. This card is extremely powerful against Rogue and in the mirror. If your opponent ends on, say, Dweller and Rukulos, you can Super Poly them using your draw phase, turn player priority to go into Mud Dragon, basically just shutting out their entire turn. But Super Poly is a little bit worse in Master Duel because we don't have Garura, which is only available in the TCG currently. So it's a bit hit or miss. And finally, for main deck stuff, we have Gravekeeper's Trap. This card is extremely win more. You're essentially bricking your deck with 2 additional bricks, being Gravekeeper's Trap and Exchange of the Spirit, just for an Abyss Dweller style effect, which you can already sort of natively do with your own Abyss Dweller. The Abyss Dweller in your grave can also just be recycled over and over again to make Mud Dragons, because it is a water. And I just feel like committing 2 cards in your main deck that are basically only specifically for the tier limit matchup and going first, it just is not worth it in my opinion, and I feel it's just way too win more. And for the extra deck, we have Gigantic Sprite. You can make Gigantic Sprite by going into Elf, revive either a Herald or a Merly, and you can go Gigantic Sprite, summon Diviner from the deck, and you could say mill a whatever, and just make another Sprite Elf in order to just sort of play on your opponent's turn. But I feel that's a little too greedy, and I don't want to get it twisted that badly. However, Gigantic Sprite is an option that you can look into. And speaking of things to look into, let's get into the game. So we are going second. We've opened up a pretty good hand of Maxi Havness. They're going to be playing Adamancer Vernisylph, which is an extremely powerful deck that had just come out. They're going to use Call by the Grave on our Maxi, which is, funnily enough, not the correct decision, considering, well, Tier Element is running around. They're going to call by our Maxi. Maxi's going to resolve Negated, and the Vernisylph with the Flourishing Hills is going to add the Awakening something, and they're going to special summon the Supplier that they just discarded. They're going to go Supplier on field to search, and we're going to activate Havness, and 3 words starts with a G. You know what it is. Time to get it twisted, and we hit pretty well. They're going to add their Guardian, and we milled a yugioh, which is all we need, and oh my god, we hit 2 names. They're going to activate the effect of Rival Golem because it was sent to the graveyard by card effect. We're going to go Chainlink 2, Chainlink 3 Merly, Chainlink 4 Kelbeck. We're going to use Kelbeck last in order to make sure that we have enough stuff in graveyard to shuffle away. We're going to Shiren, return Merly, the one we activated because we're dumb and we forgot. We're going to go into Kit Close. They're going to revive the Revival Golem. We're going to go Chainlink 1, Rhino Heart that we milled, Chainlink 2, Scream to search, and Chainlink 3, Kit Close in order to add we're actually going to send Havnis, because that's the only name we haven't activated this turn. We're going to add Soliek, and Rhino Heart is going to special summon itself, discarding Heartbeat, which is a bit weak in this matchup. We don't have any traps in our grave, so we're going to just go Rhino Heart to Havnis 1. Rhino Heart is going to send the Merly that we shuffled back just to use as an additional name, and we're going to shuffle Havnis, Merly, and get rid of the Rhino Heart to go into Kaleido Heart. Kaleido Heart is going to return the Revival Golem back to the deck. They're going to use the Awakening Forest to pitch the something. It's an Adamantipator. They're going to use Neshadal Genius to target the Kit Close so it can activate its effects. They're going to use the Adamantipator Analyzer and try and get it twisted themselves, but guess what? When we mill 10 from your deck, you tend to run out of rocks. They're going to go into Adamantipator Arisen. Dragite, they're going to use Ducky. They're going to pitch the Guardian in their grave, in their hand to try and revive something out of their graveyard and search. Oh, but guess what? We have 2 shufflers in our graveyard that we got by, milling 5 trillion cards. After targeting every single earth monster in their graveyard so they can't really revive anything impactful, they concede the game. By the way, this wasn't even our turn. So now that you saw the deck in action, let's get into the pros and cons. Pro number 1, it is extremely consistent and powerful. I don't think I have to explain why playing on your opponent's turn and getting 5 trillion setups is exactly, a little bit overtuned, but it absolutely is. This deck makes Prank Kids look like a GOAT deck by comparison. 2, it is extremely flexible. You could basically fulfill any sort of graveyard shenanigans and deck building requirements as long as you hit the requirement of this sends cards to the graveyard. You could play Needlebug Nest in this deck if you wanted to. It would probably be good. And 3, this deck is extremely resilient to most types of interaction. If your opponent tries to max C you, you're completely fine just passing, because Havnis in your hand just, kind of gets you most of the way there. If you have graveyard shufflers in your deck, you're basically most of the way there. If you end on Merly Soliek, if you have at least one other name in your hand, you're all the way there, because Kaleido Heart at Havnis is the greatest play ever conceived. And let's talk about the cons. 1, this deck loses to Graveyard Hate. I don't think I have to explain why Graveyard Hate is good against the Graveyard deck, but with people playing stuff like Necro Valley, Dimensional Shifter, Ghost Bell, and DD Crow against this deck, you're going to be facing a lot of silver bullets, much more than you would if you were playing, Sprite. I don't think anyone's main decking Stygian Dirge. 2, this deck is extremely hard to pilot optimally. I am bad at this game. I don't know what I'm doing. I just click the little shiny button and the game reminds me what to do. If you're playing at a tournament level, be prepared for one of the most mind-melting, stressful situations of chain link 11s you will ever see. And by the way, if you're in a mirror match, it will be the most miserable mind-testing experience you've ever had. And 3, there is no third downside. This deck is broken. Build this shit immediately and get to Diamond 1. Congratulations, you were truly the better player. Get it twisted.